Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. So in today's episode, we're delighted to partner with the National Talent Academy for VFX, an initiative supported by Fís Éireann Screen Ireland. And you can learn more about their training opportunities and supports that they offer at nationaltalentacademies.ie/VFX. This episode was recorded on location at the Spinners Mill studio during the RENDR Festival, and this is a vibrant gathering for creatives featuring local and international speakers from across film, gaming, animation and immersive technologies. So find out more about this at renderfestival.com. In a few moments, we'll be catching up with James Carson. So he is the CG supervisor at Sony Pictures Imageworks, whose recent works include KPop Demon Hunters, and has just supervised the feature film Project Hail Mary starring Ryan Gosling. But first, we're really delighted to welcome Noel O'Malley. He's the CG on-set supervisor at Union VFX, with credits spanning Ex Machina to 28 years later. And Dean Koonjul, he's BAFTA-winning DFX supervisor at Union VFX, whose global career includes Poor Things and 28 years later, The Bone Temple. So thanks so much for chatting with us. Is this your first render?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It was a great day of talks, some very inspiring discussions and expertise. In terms of like industry and conferences and networking, how important are like events like this or building a network in terms of progressing your career?
Well, I mean, I think it is important. I mean, it's a great kind of window into the industry for people that are interested, and it's very different to kind of like how things were when I started in the industry. Yeah. So to have actually sort of first-hand access to professionals working and kind of recognise a community that's involved in VFX and all kind of new tech and stuff is, I think it's really invaluable because it's as much as that has opened doors in terms of the roots in are a lot more established than they were a few years ago. It's also it hasn't got any easier really, so I think to kind of have a community that is able to sort of support and promote each other is really good. And I think actually here in Northern Ireland it does feel like that at RENDR. It kind of feels like everyone's got each other's back a little bit.
Yeah, it does. Like even just talking to people around here are like, oh, you should speak to so and so or so and so, because people know who's the best person to help you out, or if you've got a certain project in mind or something like that. So it's quite quite community sort of focused. People know each other a lot more than when you go to larger sort of conferences where people from loads of different places, and it sort of makes it a bit harder to kind of network, because there's not that kind of initial band of friends who are hosting it and are actually promoting it and with it, rather than a sort of faceless sort of corporation type setup where it's a bit more kind of, impersonal. I guess like the initial question was sort of more about, what this provides for networking, and if you're trying to break into the industry, and those resources weren't necessarily accessible, I'd say. Like they probably were happening, but when I started out as a runner, and you just get your foot in the door and literally you're making tea for someone or coffees or whatever. I was probably better at using the coffee machine than using any of the skills that I'd picked up in university to start with. So it was, and that was kind of the way it was then. But now the courses are more focused, they're more kind of pinpointed sort of to what you potentially want to be. So you sort of technically you're in a better position, but it's always hard to get that initial kind of foot in the door. That's still the problem, I think.
And I'd actually love to chat with both of you as well about what that experience was like for you, like so yours was an internship, getting just in there and getting promoted from there, and would that have been the same experience? Like what did you do in college then to even get those first opportunities?
Okay. Well, I kind of sidestepped into visual effects. I sort of trained as a 2D animator, and I wanted to make short films, so I ended up going to the National Film and Television School did an animation direction course there, and then started using software to kind of just composite and color the animation. So that kind of got me into using like Adobe After Effects. From that, when I started working, I was working at animation houses doing a lot of motion graphics, and again through software kind of sidestepped into compositing, and then working on sort of TV series, music videos, more live action, and then eventually sort of feature films, and kind of just have sort of been doing visual effects and compositing in feature films since, and just kind of follow that path.
Is it digital DFX was your role on that, or
So I joined Union as a DFX supervisor.
Yeah.
I was the visual effects supervisor on the Bone Temple. Yeah, but we worked like closely across, because Union were doing both projects 28 years later and the Bone Temple. There was a lot of crossover in terms of shared assets, shared resources. Although we had different supervision teams, because we had relationships with the two directors from the different films. We definitely kind of like obviously shared crew and as well. So yeah, there was. Yeah, but I've been a DFX supervisor there for a while, and then I've started VFX souping in the last couple of years.
And then in terms of the sort of the different levels, like what are the levels of responsibility that you gain from, like when you start out in something that's relatively simple up to something like that has so many moving parts, that and again, like a film, like a very long awaited franchise coming back. Like, what are those kind of career steps that it takes to get up there, and the skill set sort of that you need?
I mean, you obviously learn more as you go. You learn about the role, about the technical side, and and the job, and you get more proficient and skilled at the actual work. But I think the things that kind of help you progress into those roles, into sort of supervision roles, are kind of the things that you don't really get, or that I didn't get into the industry for that stuff. It was like that's a sort of set of skills that kind of you have to kind of gain as you go, really. And it's like, so it's odd, because obviously before I became a supervisor, I was an artist and then a lead, and I was kind of very comfortable compositing, and yeah, I kind of like felt I knew what I needed to do in every situation. Whereas I think becoming and stepping into supervision roles, it almost felt like I was becoming a junior again, and then having to relearn a new set of skills and a new set of rules. But the one thing that I think has kind of kept me in good stead throughout is just to try and be focused on whatever the client wants, and that usually ultimately is story driven. And so if you're always focused on kind of what is the best thing for the story and the production, then that will generally steer you and help you make the right kind of choices that you need to make.
And what would be, say, the workflow on a project like this for both of you? Like, are there different sort of, like, does it go through different life cycles in terms of, if this is the beginning stage, is this the end? Is there a definitive set of planning that it takes to get this over the line?
Yeah, I'd say there's obviously pre-shoot, where you have an idea of what they want to achieve, whatever the production wants to do, but then there's the balancing the financial side of how much they want to pay for things, and sort of from that it's briefs and creative briefs to try and sort of supply the vision within their budget. So there's a lot of kind of thinking how the best way to do this, suggestions, looking at sort of new technology or things like that might help. So that it is an area that kind of expands. But from that point onwards, you sometimes would do proof of concept. If you have an idea, you might want to sort of check if the client's sort of thinking, yeah, that's a great idea, or no. And then when they start shooting, you obviously have more confidence in what you've got to bring to the table, because you've concepted it and you've checked that it's going to work. And so there's different levels of sort of getting through it, but once it's shot, then the work sort of comes in post-wise, and that's when you start looking at crew and managing people, and it sort of gets like there's different levels to it, where sort of the responsibility and the burden sort of kind of gets spread out. And I think sometimes when people progress in their career, sometimes it's not necessarily because they're really good at doing everything. It's because maybe they're really good at knowing who's the best person to do something. So sometimes it's not a reflection on how good you are at everything. It's just you're the right person for a team or for getting the best out of people.
It's ultimately problem solving, isn't it? And if you're able to kind of contribute and help solve the problem, then that'll help you in your career, whether or not it's like on a conceptual level or a more kind of technical level.
I suppose it's far-sighted thinking and near-sighted thinking as well. You're like, okay, this is the immediate problem, but actually if we don't fix this now, it'll cost so much more money later down the line. And you talked about managing expectations. Is that something when you're on set and they're filming and they'd be like, oh, we can fix that in post, you'd be like, you can fix this in post. Like, you can't fix it. Like, is that something that you have to kind of go in and be like, I know that's your vision, but does it get political? Like, it's a tough situation to be in, really, because you're not the director and you're not the producer, but your job is to flag things that will cost them money down the line, and generally the producer will listen to you when you talk about money, but the director sometimes won't. So you're this person that's been dropped in that kind of disrupts things, and it's I'd say going on set isn't necessarily the nicest experience, when you're not sort of bedded into the team from the beginning, and you might have to drop in for a few days and no one knows who you are, but you're kind of shaking things up a bit, and it's definitely a testing environment to
once you're on set, a lot of the on-set team aren't necessarily aware of what happens when you take you pick up a project post shoots, so they're not kind of necessarily, I mean, some people are very interested and kind of want to ask and learn about what it is that you're doing and how you're contributing, but not everyone is aware. So
but it kind of makes that word "fix it in post" like even more of a sort of gotcha, because they don't know what that means sometimes.
And ultimately it is possible, with the technology that we have and everything, it is possible to kind of do almost anything in post, but there obviously are limitations and there's schedule, and
that goes back to the budget.
Exactly. So it's like, and that's why I think and there are directors that are kind of happy to involve, it's one of the things about union is because we work a lot closely with directors and kind of do get involved early on, and pre-shoot as well. It's the sooner that you can get involved and kind of like have those discussions and kind of like plan, they're aware of what certain implications may be, and then it's just a lot easier. It just facilitates a much easier path going forwards.
I'm gonna ask sort of almost like a cautionary tale for people when they're filming, that things that are like almost prohibitively or such a waste of time, like I presume there are things that if you just caught it on the shoot, like just say if there was like, I don't know, a specific logo or something like that you're like, actually we don't have clearance for that, we have to get rid of it now in every single thing, like what are some of the worst ones? They don't even have to be ones you have dealt with, but like what are like almost like the most pointless things that you're like, if you had just...
I think I've heard one where it's like, it's a period drama and someone's just flagged that there's an aeroplane in the distance and this shot will cost you money to fix it. Just wait a minute. No, we can't. But and it's just simple little things sometimes that can help, and it's it's just, you're there for a reason, and it's your reason really is to minimize. You would think as a business you want to make the most money, but ultimately when you're on set you want to minimize the work later for what we have to do. So
and it's obviously all budgets are limited, and it's just about kind of where and how you want to spend the money that you've got. It's like, do you want to spend it kind of fixing things, or do you want to actually put it where it's going to count on screen and kind of embellish and enhance and kind of actually elevate the production? So the more that you can save in one area, you get to spend in another. So that's kind of the thinking a little bit behind it. But that said, I think it's it's inevitable that you can't avoid everything. So there's always going to be something, but it's like Noel says, it's just about trying to limit that as much as possible. And ultimately on the day, I think it's their their call.
It's their call, and you don't know the whole sort of ins and outs of the priorities. We won't necessarily be there every single day on set to cover like the drama stuff that doesn't require any VFX, and it should all be great in camera. But things do pop up, like there's a logo or something which no one ever caught or flagged, and it becomes a VFX shot all of a sudden, or a whole sequence becomes a VFX shot. So
I think there was one thing just
you're like, oh no.
Yeah,
but I mean, one thing that I kind of enjoy about the role as well is that you get to become part of the kind of a creative solution, problem solving kind of team, really. And I remember on the Bone Temple, there was a day quite close to the end of the filming that I think Alfie, who plays Spike, I think he lost a tooth, and he had to do a close-up line to camera, and so the producers sort of came and said, what can we do about this? It's like, we need to, what would it cost, or what would be the intentions to kind of like fill in his tooth with a CG tooth, or they'd do something in VFX to kind of put the tooth back. And I was like, well, you could. And I guess they wanted to just sound that out to see what the thinking was, and obviously I'm sure they thought of it before, but it was like, well, does it need to be, if you do need to do something, can you lock off the camera so make it a little bit easier, or does he have to be facing, can you face him away slightly, can you change the angle so that the tooth is there? So that they ultimately they filmed that scene, and they did what they could in camera, and it was something that they decided in later that it wasn't an issue. Whether or not you could see it, I don't know if no one would have spotted it. So it was like, it doesn't need to become a VFX shot. But I think being on hand to have whenever those sort of situations arise that you just never know, it's kind of important to contribute in that way.
To make something different and easier and cheaper. And what's your favorite things to do? Like, what are the most sort of rewarding and satisfying jobs or projects, or even little pieces of work or part of the work?
It's a tough one.
Yeah, well, I mean, the irony is that it's always rewarding when no one knows what you've done, or no one sees or notices any of your work, and they just assume that there isn't any VFX. That's the kind of like the best compliment that you can get, especially a lot of the invisible effects that we do.
The dinosaur was always there.
Yeah,
he was there when we got here.
Yeah, I mean, we do less, not so much creature stuff, and we do a lot of environment work. And invisible effects, but I think for me the most rewarding thing is to kind of like feel that we're actually helping to elevate the story and kind of helping to deliver the director's vision in that way.
Like when people come to you and they're like, okay, well our budget is limited, like we want to achieve like all of this, like everything. I want it to look like a medieval painting and have this and this and this, and I want to make it rich and layered, and then do you guys kind of go back and go, okay, this is what it would cost, this is things that we could do, like that's the creative solutions? Like is that always part of the job in the beginning, and then are there things that can just like crop up by accident that even not necessarily due to filming, like something is shot in a specific way that makes it harder? Or
definitely there is things that are shot in a way that doesn't help sometimes, like if there's lots of motion blur, or sometimes things happen with camera equipment, like cranes might have some shake or something that they can't quite work out, and then all of a sudden you've got this plate that's got this very noticeable kind of shake or motion blur on it, like really subtle. So it's there is these things that crop up that you can't really plan for, but it's you just have to kind of fix it in post in those situations.
But you can also, there are also conversations that you can have with the production, the filmmakers, if they want something with all the sort of bells and whistles in a sequence. It's like, well, you know, obviously, well, not obviously, but if this is like beyond the budget, or if this is not in the original kind of scope of work and things, it's like, well, you want to try and give them what they want, something. Or like suggest ways of achieving what they want to achieve. So it may be that, you know, that you can focus on one shot and work that up to and kind of put in some of that in one shot to establish what it is that they want. But then if, you know, and a lot of it comes down to the editing as well. It's like, but then you can maybe then roll, you know, hold back, so it doesn't become like a 50 shots in a sequence. You kind of like make the point and set it up, and then it's kind of accepted. So it's like, again, it's like understanding or having an idea of where to spend the money that they've got to kind of get the most impact from it. So it's like, yeah, you can have this, but maybe you can't have it across the whole sequence. So you just have to pick your moments and pick what's and it's part of our job as well to kind of understand or try and decipher what's the most important thing. You know, what is the crux of it? You know, they may be asking for all of these things, but ultimately, if the story's about this would be the most kind of beneficial thing to kind of try and implement or put into the scene to help tell that story.
Like everything is about all of it is about problem solving as well. As like, you know, to people that have, you know, worked on a lot and really, really understand things, like what would be your pet peeves of things that you spot as experts that you'd be like, oh god, that doesn't work? Do you know, like, I presume you're not allowed to like name check things, but like hypothetically, you know, like if you're like, oh god, never do that. Like maybe they're cliche, or like maybe it's just something that your eyes are just finely tuned to go like, oh, no.
That's a hard one because I think whenever I watch something, if I'm all of a sudden out of the movie because I'm wondering how they did it, or something's jarred, like I think when it jars there's something wrong. But if something's sort of made me go, how did they do that? That's because it was executed really well. So it's hard, but annoyingly I want to watch a film and not ever have that happen. I want to be stuck in it.
No one watches a film to pick holes in. Everyone wants to kind of be part of the story and kind of experience that. But if there is something that pulls you out of it, then it's and I think sometimes in certain situations I think people don't help themselves particularly. Like they might be trying to do something in CG that that, you know, and I think sometimes like a creature, some CG creature sequences can be a little bit off-putting, whether it's in the animation or just the general believability, and it can. But I think everyone's sort of prepared to suspend their disbelief and wants to do that and kind of like be taken along for the ride. But I guess that's the peeve, is like when that
I think sometimes things can be too epic as well. You know, like you're like, oh no, if something's like gone too far, and you know you might have a camera move that take over, and you know it might have impressed you once, but if it happens again, it's sort of.
But it's it's one of those kind of like unwritten, you know, it's an undrawn line of where that is, and it's slightly different for everyone. Like people's tolerances are very different for these things, and even me, you know, I have, depending on how engaged I am in the movie, and that's not just down to the VFX, that's down to the filmmakers and how well, you know, and just my personal taste as well. Like I'm prepared to forgive some ridiculous things if I'm invested in it, you know. So it's about getting the audience invested in the story you're telling.
And what are some like total tropes? Like, do you remember there was there was this grading in the noughties, and it was just like orange and teal. But like, what's the like present VFX like tropes where you're like, don't do this. Everyone does this. I guess I do this 100 times.
Sometimes it's hard for us to know kind of what our work's going to look like once it's graded. You know, we'll work to the plate or a sort of neutral kind of temporary grade, and you know we'll work hard to make sure everything's right and balanced, and then when you see it in the cinema or whatever, everything that you spent time on has just been crunched or is not as visible as it was before, and it can be slightly frustrating.
I think lots of things go through quite extreme grades once they're in the DI, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that as an artist, when I was compositing, I think I would see things, and if something dramatic or extreme was done in the grade, I'd be kind of almost offended by it, and it was just like, well, how could they do that to this shot? I worked so hard on. But I think, you as a supervisor, you're equally invested in shots, although you're not maybe labouring away on it day after day. And I think, you kind of, it's easier to kind of understand the decisions that are made, for the movie as a whole, and the creative choices and the aesthetic choices. So it's easier to kind of roll with what, even though you're used to seeing something in one way for a year plus.
Is there anything that's almost like that wasted opportunity, or is there anything you're like, oh my god, it could have been so good, or like there was just something a bit off? Or actually, that's probably a mean thing that you probably can't say. But it's more like I want to see how you see other things and what is good and what isn't, because I think my personal palette or understanding would just be like so flat, that it wouldn't have that like nuance of what really works. I'll ask it actually in a positive way. What is like a piece of VFX that you are like, oh, that is breathtaking. I wish I had done that.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's very like subjective. Like if you're into a different genre, or you're watching a TV series and you're really into it, I think it's quite hard to really put your finger on something. You might watch a whole series or a season of something which is VFX heavy, but it hasn't even caught your eye in any way, just because the story and the editing is all the other things have sort of pulled it all together, and it's a nice cohesive bit of work. So it's sitting on the fence there.
Yeah, I mean, there's technologically there's some really impressive things out there. Like they're just kind of, even after 25 years almost in the industry, I'm like blown away by some of the work that I see. But I think ultimately, there are reasons behind all of that as well, and there are reasons that some things might not look as good as they could. Whether it's budget limitations, reshoots, whatever the situation was, but ultimately, once something's filmed and it's there and it's on screen, no one's really going to remember all of those situations that led to that. So you kind of have to just judge things by the final product, really. And then I think it's like as much as there are kind of super big budget, expensive, amazing effects, you can do something equally creative on a really small scale with a low budget, and something equally inspiring. So I think, I love that about work. It's that there's so much scope within it.
For you, and the satisfaction in like working on projects like that will play in audiences across the world, will make people gasp and like flinch and have that emotional reaction on people. Does the satisfaction come when you've kind of like watched that bit and you're like, oh my god, we've got it? Like, is that the biggest satisfaction? Is the satisfaction watching it with an audience, or is the satisfaction when it wins an award? Like where, or all of them, which to different ways? Like, where's the kind of like the bit where you're like, oh my god, that was brilliant, I'm delighted, I love my job?
I think obviously if it won an Oscar for the best visual effects, you'd be delighted.
Yeah.
But I think working at union, we get like a broad kind of sort of range of films and directors, and a lot of them aren't visual effects heavy, but a lot of them in the past have sort of been up for best film nominations and stuff like that. So a lot of people have seen them, and people would go, oh wow, you worked on that, and a little bit of satisfaction because they would have gone and seen it. And it's when you say I'm working visual effects, people just think of like Marvel and stuff like that, but to actually have had sort of an impact on other films that have done really well, which kind of would fall into more of the invisible visual effects, but have obviously been sort of key parts to stories.
Yeah, it's still integral, isn't it? In terms of what role that they play.
Yeah, it's that I think for me that's quite satisfying, being able to, you know, have such a range of films and shows to have worked on, that all aren't the same as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's also, as well as kind of like the finished product, it's always nice to work on a film that you personally enjoy and that, you know, that you kind of think is a great film. That's always rewarding. But there's a lot of kind of satisfaction and sort of just on the day to day as well, like kind of like doing that, going through those processes of problem solving. So it's, even if, you know, I've worked on films that I've really enjoyed that I don't think anyone's ever seen, you know, may not have seen it. It's like, but actually I remember them, you know, fondly, because like the team that you're working with, kind of things that you learn. It's just that you spend a lot of your time doing the work, and what you remember from that isn't just the end product, it's kind of the experience. So yeah, there's a lot of rewarding moments just trying to, and challenging, just trying to and even just coming through the challenging moments is quite rewarding as well.
Sometimes you don't have to have a reward, so you just have like a bad memory, but you remember it, and it somehow helps later.
And I think it's just, you know, most people that work in visual effects are kind of passionate about filmmaking and visuals, you know, so I think, yeah, like just being part of that community is rewarding.
It is, and it's fabulous. And thank you so much for chatting with us. We hope you have a nice flight home and return to London. And yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out now for all that stuff in the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.
And now we're really delighted to welcome James Carson, CG Supervisor at Sony Pictures Imageworks. So thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
So you've worked on some incredible titles. I was just wondering if you could talk me through your career journey. When, you know, were you always sort of technical and visual, and as a kid, when did you know this was the field that you wanted to work in?
Yeah. Well, I started off always interested in computers. You know, there was video games, and that sort of piqued my interest, and then wanting to know how they were made. And so I got into a little bit of programming then. That was sort of early days of the internet, but, you know, there was enough tutorials, I suppose, on to learn a bit about programming. So all of that sort of piqued my interest, and so I chose to study computer games technology at Manchester Met. And so I went over for that, and that was basically designing games, programming games, all the stuff that goes into producing a game. And so that's where I started out. So, you know, programming heavy. What
were the games that you would have played growing up that kind of brought you to that field?
Yeah, I mean, the big one was Counter-Strike. Was a big well, there was that I suppose that came a little later, just based on the era, but Sega Mega Drive, Nintendo 64, Game Boy was a huge one for me. So that's where I started all that love for it. And so then, studied at Manchester Met, and then finished, assumed I would be able to go out and get any job now that I had a degree. It's never actually that simple. So applied for some game studios, didn't work out for me. And so I branched out a little more and reached out to Double Negative in London. And they're a VFX studio. And so started off doing as a runner there. So basically delivering hard drives between the different studios in Soho, helping sort mail, all of that sort of stuff. But that was like a great entry point for, you know, you're walking around the office, you're seeing what everyone's doing on their computers. And so you're seeing the movie sort of being made as you walk from room to room, and you get to see all the different disciplines. So yeah, I just started off there, moved into Match Move, which is doing the cameras, and then eventually focused on lighting, and then stuck with that.
And what is the sort of aptitude that you need that helps you do well in this? So I presume it's, you know, like maths and logical thinking, and like are there things that, you know, like naturally that you have to be good at? Are there sort of skills that you can build up as well to you know, advance in the field?
For VFX specifically, it actually in any show, it actually encompasses a broad range of people. Like you get the really creative, artsy people, and they're useful, you know, in concept art, in lighting and compositing, all over. But then we do have the really heavy, you know, development people who really focus on the programming aspect of things. So it really honestly depends on what you want to do, right?
Are they very different departments and in
Very,
very different
very
places?
different.
And you can tell which one
You can
immediately is
definitely
which one
tell,
when you walk into a
exactly.
room. Yeah.
But you know what's great about it is there is that variety. So you've got like these ultra creative people with the programmers, and it's like a melting pot of, you know, they have a creative problem to solve and they know what they want it to look like, but they don't necessarily have the technical know-how to, and so you have that support of the technical people to realize the creative goals. So for me, you know, math I think is a strong one to have, because you know, especially when it comes to lighting, you know, there's like the render engine and there's programming to sort of speed up your workflow a little. So you know, focusing on math, at least for what I did, felt like a good one. I would have improved my strengths on that sooner.
Maths is really important. Are there any sort of soft skills as well that are like, you know, an environment like that with that many moving parts and that many departments and presumably deadlines, like would like that, like patience and
100%. Yeah, no, being able to, like, you know, the environment can be stressful because you're, like you say, you're trying to hit deadlines, you know, they're expecting new versions, but you also have to work with other people and communicate what you need help with. And so really being able to explain things well and clearly and concisely so they can help you and get you the right help that you need is an important skill. And then more so as I moved from a lighter to a supervisor and managing a team and find out how to communicate with people, you know, on your team effectively was a huge learning curve for me, and still is, of course. So, yeah.
You moved over for that job, or were you in London before already?
Well, I had moved over with the intention of, you know, I felt like if I was there closer to, I had more chance of, you know, if I had an address that was nearby, then they're not going to, you know, it's going to be easier to hire me than seeing an address where there's relocation and all of that involved. So yeah, it was in order to put myself closer to VFX in order to get the job.
And I presume as well, I know a lot of Irish people that move over, like there's a culture shock as well then, because it's such a big and bustling place.
Oh, it was crazy. Even for me going to Manchester, it felt like a culture shock coming from Ballygally, which is up the Antrim coast there, and then Manchester, and then of course London's on a different scale yet again for that. So yeah, huge.
You get your first opportunity to sort of, you know, scale up from those, you know, entry jobs. Was that like a moment of trepidation? Were you excited to go into it? Were there any, you know, moments of anxiety at that point?
Of course. I mean, imposter syndrome, I feel like I still feel it to this day, even today. But yeah, just always doubting, like, is this have I made the right choice? I don't know everything. It seems like everyone else knows everything. And so, like, yeah, just constantly trying to keep up with what you think is what everyone else knows, yeah.
At this point as well, is the aim always upskill and go back to games? Like, a little bit?
I think it was at the early stages. It was like upskill and then focus back to games. But then, like, seeing the magic of how, like, VFX is done and, like, how it's all brought together and so many different departments, like you know, I could almost spend all day just explaining how it goes through all the different departments. So initially, yeah, but not once I really got my teeth into VFX. No, I was happy where I was and still am. So
great. So talk to me about that trajectory then. You know, like, were there beats that were kind of tougher to move on to? Were there roles that were, you know, like, that were like bigger gulfs to move up as you're going up your ladder?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the position change. So starting, you know, I started off in Match Move, which is solving for cameras. Then I did more of a generalist role. And then, you know, I wanted to focus on lighting. So, you know, you start off and you produce shots, but you see other people produce shots and you can see that they're better. And so, you know, there's not a simple answer as to why they're better. like they look better on screen. And so it's like learning what it is, what it requires to make a shot look good that goes in the movie. So that was a big jump for me. And then moving into like a lead position where you're sort of like the go-to person for a team. You're not running a team necessarily, but you're the go-to for it. Was just trying to have all the answers and know who to ask if you didn't have all the answers.
I suppose that's like, again, it goes back to the soft skills to progress in your career, like management and people management. And then, like when pressure hits and you've personalities then under you that, that you have to learn to work with that. Was that something that took a bit of time, or was it something that you were like, okay, no, these are the rules, I'll learn them and then I'll do it?
I would say it's the first one, which is it took a bit of learning, and it still does right to this day, because when you're in the lighting lead position, you're like part of the team, but you're not running the team, so you're not directly having to like check people's output, interact with them, as a supervisor. Whereas going to the supervisor role, you are running that team, they're coming to you with their problems. And that was a big shift. But yeah, no, it's always I'm always trying to learn more, trying to understand what makes people tick, so that like I can help them as best as I can. But ultimately, just I think being patient is like a big one, because you don't necessarily know what's going on in someone's day. So they may be having a tough day today and only today, and so giving them that room to like be stressed and not you get stressed as a result of it. Try and keep that in mind.
That's a long time that you've been in the industry, and you've been working towards, like on some of the coolest projects in that time. There's been huge technological leaps and bounds, and I was just wondering if you can kind of like talk me through how that might have impacted your day-to-day work. Like if that shift comes in from software, or like those, like, does that take a lot out of a team, or is it something that you guys are working on all the time?
Yeah, I mean, at least for us, the technological shift is always with like processing power. It's how much you can get back from, we called it like the render farm. So how many images you can get back from the render farm and how quickly you can do it. And so there's always that improvement, but the clients are also aware of that constantly improving technology. And so their requests get more complicated and larger. And so as the technology improves, basically their requests become more creative and tougher to solve. So it almost balances out, right? Like whatever we could produce back in the day, it's probably roughly the same as now, but the image itself has improved so much.
Yeah. And then tell me about the shift or working in Sony. Was that different then? So if you've worked in your original position for like, or your original kind of company for so long, moving to another place, I mean, and like doing incredible work, like, are you excited there? Is there a moment of it takes a while to understand the like the different codes and conventions that other spaces have? Or
yeah, no, there is definitely differences. Like I've been at studios like smaller and TV type stuff where it's a lot more loose and sort of whatever gets the job done, whereas the bigger studios like Sony tend to be clearer definition of what the disciplines are. And so what's great about that is there's more specialization within it, and then you just have to learn how to communicate across those departments, because everyone has their specialties there. But yeah, it's just a bigger studio, and because it's obviously part of Sony Corporation, so there's a little more of a businessy vibe to it. But Imageworks specifically is a great place to be. Yeah.
And can you tell me about maybe the projects over the years that you've particularly learned things from, or that you've really enjoyed doing for different reasons?
Yeah. Well, I started off in VFX. I think I mentioned that. So that's matching the plate and integrating the CG with the live action as best as you can, and that's like a satisfying result in its own right. Whereas Sony does VFX and animated features, as you know, with K-pop. And that was like a huge learning curve. You'd mentioned before, like, you know, the gulfs in learning and my capabilities. Well, that was a big one there as well, where improving like the creative muscle in order to understand how to like make a nice image for an animated feature like that was a big learning curve for me.
Yeah. And what are the main differences like for each? Like, what would that mean on your workflow, on what you're doing, that maybe we wouldn't even think about? Then if you're building up a really complicated action shot for a film that's like quite CG, or if you're kind of building the whole world from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the like, there's a lot, where you're dealing with plates, we're dealing with retimes when it comes to VFX shows. There's more of a technical aspect to it, and it's usually a bit of a tighter deadline, so it's being able to work as efficiently as you can. Whereas animated features, it's a little more of a collaboration. Usually Sony does pretty much the whole movie when it comes to animated features. I don't think there's one they haven't. So it feels a little more collaborative, right? You're not working, it's not Marvel, say, and then you're one of the vendors, and you're dealing with an intermediary, usually the client side VFX supervisor. Whereas Sony, they've come to us for animated features with the whole movie, and they want to collaborate. It's usually, Sony Pictures Animation's one of the companies. And so, yeah, there's a lot more, it feels more collaborative in that sense. And yeah, just the more creative and almost like the innovation, there's still innovation in VFX, of course, but, with the chibi pipeline stuff, that was like fun to see. And Spider-Verse, of course, trying to like break the mold a little.
Yeah. And things like that. Like, I know you're doing a specific section of it, but like melding all those different styles of animation, is there, like fun, like is that, like, are there particular parts of those kind of projects that you just really enjoy getting your teeth into?
Yeah, of course. With Spider-Verse specifically, there was I think it was 5 or 6 different looks from different comic book artists. And so just the way it sort of rolled out, we were almost specialists within the movie for different comic book styles.
Because even each one would have a slightly different physics.
Yeah.
I always wondered,
yeah,
like, how, like, are you, like, do you get privy to the discussion? It's like, okay, you've got to kind of like pick a unifying way in which fabric moves. Or,
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what, Spider-Verse was the one that sort of created the, what my talk started off about was look a picture, right? It's like, what is this movie gonna look like? And yeah, that was kind of where that's where that stuff gets figured out, right? It's like, okay, here's your 5 or whatever different comic book styles, but look a picture is where like they really define what specifically, like the physics, like you mentioned, or the style, like what sort of screen tones and how it transitions, or is it on 2s, is it on 4, stuff like that.
When a project comes to you and your desk, and your team are kind of going, okay, this is the bit that we're doing in it, how does it arrive? Like, do you get the script, the pitch deck? Do you, like, are you all brought into a room? Like, what is that process like?
I'm not part of that process.
Yeah.
That sort of happens above me. Usually the way it works at my level is, we're brought on to a project, and that level has already been figured out, and Sony has the project, and now it's like, okay, we're making the movie, but what exactly is it going to look like? And that's where I come in. So I don't know too much about that stage at the moment.
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is, are you experiencing the film in fragments? Like you're just working on one specific element of the film, and like if you don't have the full picture, like something like KPop Demon Hunters that like is like nothing else that has ever been made. Yeah. You're like, what is this? Like, no, is there a beat? You're like, what am I doing? Like, what was
of course, no, yeah. It happens all the time. I mean, even with VFX and animated features, sometimes you're not even using, like, listening to the audio, right? Like, especially with with lighting and compositing, that isn't a major factor for us. Like, it's more important in the animation department that they hear the audio, obviously, to figure out how the mouth moves. But yeah, there is sort of like a, you know, you can go look at the movie and look at the different sequences to get an understanding broadly, but yeah, you are sort of, just by the nature of it, only focused on one part of the movie, and you know, just seeing that.
And what were those things that kind of surprise you then in terms of story? Like when you see it put together, what is it, like some, like that old saying where you know, you just look at the foot of an elephant and the tail of an elephant, like you're never gonna get the whole picture.
You're never gonna fill in that gap. Yeah, no, that it's all the jokes, right? It's you see all the fun animation happening, and then it's not until you see it with the audio or the music, then you get to see all the funny jokes that they're making, or at least with K-pop. So yeah, just seeing all the creative ideas they've come up with for how to like make a scene funny or interesting, like seeing that.
When you guys were working on, I mean, the Spider-Verse as well, do you know, like, do you guys, I probably can't ask this, but like, do you guys get an instinct, you know, like from looking at that tiny little mini, like, oh yeah, this is going to be good, or like, this is going to be weird. Like, do you, like, maybe this will be like, you know, that incredible breakout hit that is. Is it surprising then when it's finished?
I think for me, so far, it's been surprising. With Spider-Verse, I didn't have any idea. Like, you're just, you know, you're doing the movie and you're trying to bring it all together. It's kind of, I think maybe the first indication that you get how successful it might be is when they get that trailer out, and that's why trailers are so important. But yeah, I don't know if my radar is way off for movies or not, but I don't usually I don't feel like I have a good instinct for what's going to be a success or not, because I didn't see Spider-Verse and definitely not K-pop getting to the levels they did.
As someone who has worked on something that has, like, I would say probably changed the way people or like what they're looking for in a film, is that something that's quite satisfying? As you, like, what's your reaction, you know, having that piece and creating it, but then as the world like started to really embrace it, and then it sort of snowballed. Mm-hmm. What was that sort of like watching it then like?
Yeah, I mean, it is surreal, right? Like, you're spending all your time in your office just working away on it, and you have no idea how well it's going to take off. But, you know, for me, I did know nothing about K-pop before I was on it, but it's huge, right? It's like, it's a whole industry of its own, and I guess it was almost like a sleeper thing, right? Like, there was clearly a lot of people in, you know, other parts of the world very interested in K-pop, and it just seemed to be like the right time to strike, and it rejuvenated it or exposed it, and everyone got to enjoy it because they were already enjoying it in secret, or I don't know, but yeah. And
how long are you guys working on each project then? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, probably spending huge amounts of time creating it. Do they, like, are you treated to a fabulous kind of premiere of it, or is it, you know, do you just move on to something else?
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't released in the cinema, but we usually get like a cast and crew type screening. So for K-pop specifically, we did go see it. I brought my two kids, Finley and Owen, and my wife Beth to it, and we went and saw it in the cinema. So I suppose, yeah, we were one of the few people that did see it. But then, yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone expected it to be such a huge hit, because they did sort of scramble afterwards to get it into the cinemas, and then they did like a sing-along, I believe, version that followed up after that. So, yeah.
But what was it? It was like the highest viewed film on Netflix of all time, and
500 million. It was on my slides. It was 500 million views, so it's their most ever watched production of anything.
Of anything. But you can see why. Like, my family have just watched it, and I try and sell it to people, because I'm like, if you have to watch something over and over again, it might as well be good. And it's one, you know, like, you stick it on and everyone is sort of enthralled.
It's got it all, right? I hope I'm saying this right, but I think the woman who is behind like the Huntrix, the girl group in it, I think she wanted to be in the K-pop industry as a musician and maybe arrived to it a little later, and so I believe they weren't, you know, wanting to get her in a girl band or whatever, and so she branched out into this and produced the music for it, and well, look where it is now. So that's great for her too.
And now no one's allowed to talk about anything, and it's very disappointing. Because I just want to know, like, when are we going to get the next one?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have any. I'm sure it's happening. I doubt Netflix and Sony are gonna not do a second one, but no. I definitely don't have any information
as to when. And no one's allowed to talk about it.
Sorry.
Oh God, yeah, because it's one of the. Like I have been waiting. Like the second I watched that, I was like, okay, well that's
the problem with releasing a movie, right? If it's good, then everyone wants the next one. It was the same with Spider-Verse 2, right? They originally had Spider-Verse 2 for like 2026. I think it was this year or something. And obviously that's not happening right now. But as far as I know, anyway. But yeah, it's good and bad, right? You want the time, you know. If they rush it and it's not good, then that's disappointing for everyone. Whereas if they take the time, it's frustrating because you want it right away. But hopefully they do it justice.
Amazing. And then in terms of, I didn't ask this question. I'm kind of like sticking it on the end, like in the right places. But did COVID, you know, like, and everything that came out of COVID and the way people's consumers consume films change, and then as well, like how distribution has been shifting so much, like does that have an impact on your side of things much as well, like, you know, like the ability to work from home or like work practices? And
yeah, I mean it has an impact on the work because they are considering different formats, right? Like we have to consider, you know, is the format right for a phone or an iPad? And then all the way up to, you know, the cinema. So yeah, it does have an impact. And then there's like HDR, like high dynamic range, like because newer TVs are able to see like or show a larger range of values on the TVs. So, you know, that was a big push there too. Stereo came and went. There was a real phase where we did stereo for, you know, 3D movies, and that peaked and troughed as well. So yeah, did COVID affect it for the movie production? I mean, we were sort of established already for COVID. Like the way the Sony operation works is that I would be working in the Vancouver studio, but they were all sort of remote desks already. So when COVID hit, I think it was like a week, and we were up and running, everyone from their home setups, assuming they had good enough internet. So not a massive impact, but obviously some disruption.
Yeah. But does that sort of, you know, is a bit more conducive to family life and things?
Yes.
Does that, you know, like make return trips and job sharing more easier? Like, and is that something that maybe has been maintained?
I'm not sure about that, but I know for Sony, it's when you hire new people, right? When you're in an office and you're surrounded by everyone and you get to know the person beside you, and then they become the person you go to for questions later. One thing we sort of tried to solve early on is what you do with the new people, the juniors who are now work from home and are new to the industry. And so we're always trying to solve that problem, like pair them up with a buddy, like create like breakout rooms where they can meet with someone who knows information. But that's definitely a struggle. Like I do feel bad for someone trying to join the industry now, and work from home's obviously happening, and trying to find your group, right? Because you're in your house or your apartment or whatever. So,
and what changes can you see, or the impact coming down the line? I know like AI is probably the biggest thing people are chatting about now, and you know it can do so much. It'll take out the entry level jobs, but you know, like I know like what you're using is much better, but you know, like it's still making people weird, and they have three hands. Do you know, like,
of course.
And it's that, like, what are the things like maybe that you can kind of see coming down the line that might change things, like maybe for the better, maybe for the worse?
I mean, for any movie I've worked on so far, so like Spider-Verse and K-Pops and whatnot, there's been no AI used to generate the image because it's just not at that level. And when you're working with the clients, they like have very specific requests and they want to build upon what they've last seen. And that's not something it's strong for. But, you know, I think at Sony, our thing is to try and like speed up the pipeline. Maybe that's how AI could be used for us. Like, you know, what ways to do things more efficiently in order to produce the final image, but not to produce the final image itself.
Yeah, definitely. But thank you so much. That's, yeah, I'm still waiting for K-pop too.
Oh, I know, same here.
And yeah, what are you planning on catching anything for the rest of the festival?
Yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. We've got Catherine Jones, who's doing In Your Dreams tomorrow from Sony Imageworks as well. So I want to see her talk. And then, yeah, just go around and see what else there is on. But yeah, brilliant. See as much as I can, basically. Brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, thank you.
A big thank you to the Spinners Mill Studio and RENDR Festival for hosting us, and to our podcast sponsors, the National Talent Academy for VFX. So to learn more about the work they do, visit nationaltalentacademies.ie/VFX.